There is a true story that is supposed to have happened at the time of the Great Depression in America. It is about an old lady who apparently stole a loaf of bread from a bread shop, and she got caught by the police. The judge supposedly asked the woman, "Why did you steal the bread? Were you hungry?" The woman answered, "Yes, Your Honor, I was hungry, but I did not steal the bread for myself. My son-in-law abandoned his family. My daughter fell sick, and their 2 children were starving. They had not eaten in days. I could not stand seeing them hungry. They are still so young." By the time the woman finished speaking, the whole courtroom had fallen silent. The judge said to the woman, "Everyone is equal under the law. For stealing bread, you can choose. Either you pay a $10 fine, or you go to jail for 10 days. The woman said in reply, "Judge, I am willing to be punished for what I have done. But with due respect, if I had $10, I would not have stolen the bread. I am willing to go to jail. My only concern is, if I go to jail, who will take care of my daughter and my grandchildren while I am in jail?" The judge paused for a moment, and he leaned back in his chair. Then he reached into his pocket. He pulled out a $10 bill and held it up for the court to see. And then he said loudly, "With this $10 note, with this $10 bill, I will pay for your punishment. Now you are free to leave." And then he turned to the people in the courtroom and he proclaimed, "In addition, I charge each person in this court 50 cents each as a penalty for the indifference and ignorance in this community. An old woman should not have to steal bread to be able to feed her family. And so, Mr. Bailiff," he said, "go and collect the money and give it to the accused." And all the people felt honored to contribute 50 cents each. And they stood up and gave a warm applause to the verdict of the judge. True story daw to. You know, more and more I am beginning to doubt the correctness of the portrayal of justice as a blindfolded lady holding on her right hand a balancing scale and on her left hand a sword. I know that this is supposed to symbolize the impartiality of the law, or the ideal that justice should be applied without regard for wealth, power, or status in life. Naging pamilyar tayo dito sa Pilipinas doon sa Latin saying, "Dura lex sed lex." Kasi narinig natin sa TV doon sa congressional hearing, "Dura lex sed lex." Maraming Pilipino sabi, "Ano daw?" The English translation is, "The law may be harsh, but it is the law." It is supposed to mean that the laws are made not just to protect the people, but also to maintain peace and order in society. One of the justices of the Supreme Court tweeted an interesting remark during those months when the Filipinos kept hearing that Latin expression in relation to the issue about the non-renewal of the franchise of ABS-CBN. That Supreme Court Justice said, "Dura lex sed lex is not an invocation to uncritically accept an unjust act. Sometimes what is called legal may not be just. Our collective duty is to make sure the legal will also be just." For a remark like this to come from an interpreter of the law in the highest court of the land is very interesting. And I cannot agree more, because we know how often the law is used as a weapon by some people in power against their perceived enemies. Madalas nating marinig yung weaponizing the law. And we know how easily the law is invoked against people who do not have the means to defend themselves in the courts. Well, the law that is at issue in our gospel today is the third commandment among the 10 commandments, the Sabbath rule. You know, one of these days, I suggest that you open your Bibles and you check out the 2 versions of the so-called 10 Commandments. Exodus 20 and Deuteronomy 5. Please remember those. Exodus 20 and Deuteronomy 5. In both chapters, you will read the 10 Commandments. But try comparing the 2 versions. And you will find an interesting difference in the reason that is pointed out bakit kailangang sumunod sa ikatlong utos ang bayang Israel. Bakit kailangang sumunod sa Sabbath day. Exodus 20 says, God created the world in 6 days, and on the 7th day, God rested. And so, we should also rest on the Sabbath day. Obvious ba? Because we're creatures in the image and likeness of God. Kung ang Diyos niya, kailangan magpahinga, tayo pa. That's basically the point of the Exodus version. Now, listen to the Deuteronomy version. Meron siyang ibang reason for the third commandment. Ganito ang sabi niya, "The 7th day is a Sabbath of the Lord your God. You're not supposed to do any work. Either you, or your son, or your daughter, or your male slaves, or your female slaves, or your ox, or donkey, or any work animal, or even the resident migrants within your gates, so that your male and female slaves may rest, may also rest as you do." In short, the Sabbath is meant as a free day off. A free day off. Not just for the masters, but also for the slaves. Not just for human beings, but also for the animals. It is an act of justice. And the book of Deuteronomy also adds, tandaan ninyo ha, kayo rin naging alipin in the land of Egypt. You were once upon a time slaves. They oppressed you. Hindi kayo binigyan ng day off. And God liberated you, delivered you. And so, you also must be kind to the slaves. The spirit of the law was meant precisely to protect the poor and the disadvantaged, especially those who will go hungry if they take a day off from work. Madaling sabihin, wag magtrabaho, araw ng pahinga. Yung ibang tao magugutom pag hindi sila nagtrabaho. Some people live a hand-to-mouth existence. In the Gospels, you know how often Jesus had to deal with the Pharisees. Doon sa sobrang rigid application nila ng batas. And today's Gospel is one of those examples. The Pharisees claimed that the disciples violated the law because they harvested a few heads of grain. Palagay ko, mais, on a Sabbath day. And Jesus gave a principle that should never be forgotten by implementers of the law. He said, Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Sa simpleng salita, ang batas ay ginawa para sa tao, hindi ang tao para sa batas. Well, I hope you now understand why I said, maybe Lady Justice should not be blindfolded after all. She needs to see the person on whom the law is to be applied. Bakit? Because we live in a very unequal society. And we create laws precisely to promote a more just, a more compassionate, a more equitable society.